3, 2, 1.
When an atomic bomb explodes, there is a wave. This wave moves at speeds higher than the speed of sound, a shock wave. As this supersonic shock wave roars outwards in all directions, it compresses the air in front of it and superheats it. The rapid expansion of this superheated air barreling outward from the epicenter with the shock wave produces super winds, winds so strong and fast even the strongest hurricanes can't compare. Take the highest hurricane wind speed on record, for example. It was recorded on April 10, 1996, when tropical cyclone Olivia passed by Barrow Island, Australia, at 254 miles per hour. And if we take tornadoes into account, the fastest winds ever on record would then be 302 miles per hour, recorded by a Doppler on wheels during a tornado in Oklahoma, USA on May 3, 1999. Now compare these to the highest wind speeds generated by the atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945. Speeds reached 800 miles per hour, nearly 3 times the fastest winds ever recorded hitherto. Even 2 miles from the epicenters, the wind was still recorded at 70 miles per hour. After a nuclear explosion, the great wind blows for a second or so. Then comes a moment of stillness, as in the eye of a hurricane. A pregnant quiet. As the mushroom cloud rises into the red sky, a vacuum is created beneath. A suction forms. And then, air rushes back to the epicenter as the wind reverses and blows back, about half as fast, but for a longer time. Any structures which may have survived the first shock wave are likely to be totally destroyed by this reverse blast and its wave. Debris, dust, and even humans, or what's left of them, will be thrown into the air as they are violently sucked back into the blast's epicenter. As it feeds on debris and dead bodies, the mushroom cloud rises higher into the atmosphere. In the eye of the atomic cloud, the immense heat and winds give life to a self-sustaining tornado-like inferno, a firestorm. As hot air rises and cooler air is sucked in below, this firestorm causes even more winds to rush in, further feeding the flames and making escape from its eye near impossible. Fires larger than anything humanity has ever witnessed spread across the land. Gas lines explode, transmission poles and the power lines they hold vaporize. Birds and planes fall to the ground. The pavements buckle and liquefy as tires melt, along with the remains of people who don't deserve a fiery death. As the world burns, carbon dioxide fills the air, looking for an escape on the outskirts of the fallout, for any opening, and it will find it, without a doubt. It will rush into subway tunnels, buildings, windows, chimneys and cracks of any structure that survivors might have taken a shelter in. And when that happens, these final humans will asphyxiate, vomit, and convulse until they too perish. Take a picture. It'll last you longer. We've all seen images and footage of nuclear explosions. It's a part of our contemporary consciousness and visual lexicon at this point. All the images blend into one hazy image of the atomic bomb, and it is by no accident. The photographic and film records of 20th century nuclear tests are undeniably among the most scientifically valuable, and dare I say, visually stunning archives of extreme physics ever captured. But
okay, here's another conspiracy theory. You've seen all the grainy footage of nuclear test blasts.
Sure.
The mushroom clouds, and there are always these grainy things, and there's all these like little houses lined up and these little trees lined up, and it blows everything down. Well, there's always been a conspiracy theory that those were all basically fabricated at this facility. That those bombs actually were never detonated, and that basically the U.S. military was basically faking these bomb tests to freak out the Russians.
in this clip from an episode of the Joe Rogan Experience podcast, billionaire investor Mark Andreessen, co-creator of the world's first widely used internet browser, Mosaic, and co-founder of venture capital firm Andreessen Horowitz, outlines a conspiracy theory that the U.S. faked nuclear weapons tests to scare the Soviets, in essence.
So what happened to the camera?
You son of a bitch.
How is that happening yet the camera is like totally stable and fine?
Oh my God.
And by the way, and the film is fine.
Oh my God.
This looks like...
Now, to be perfectly fair, the righteous conspiratorial tone of the video notwithstanding, it is actually a legitimate question. Because really, how do you photograph the end of the world? Since its invention in the 1830s, photography has undergone a series of crucial developments. One of these major advancements was the development of high-speed cameras, which allowed humans to capture a frame-by-frame breakdown of events, too fast for the naked human eye to discern. So major were these advancements that it is damn near impossible today to imagine a world before it. Really, try it. Exhibit A. Most of us have probably seen images like these. These were created in 1878 by British photographer Edward Muybridge. He was commissioned to use photography to determine whether a horse lifted all four hooves off the ground when galloping. A seemingly simple and trivial question that highlighted the limits of our human visual perception. Using 24 cameras arranged in a line which were triggered sequentially by a horse, Muybridge captured this iconic series of photographs. This series of images was essentially the world's first high-speed motion sequence. Yep, just like that, we had entered the era of high-speed photography, slow as it may be to our hyper-modern eyes. And to answer the question, yes, horses do indeed lift all four hooves off the ground when galloping. 8 years later, in 1886, Austrian physicist Peter Salcher captured the first image of the invisible. His close associate Ernst Mach, also an Austrian physicist, was looking to produce experimental evidence for his hypothesis about a particular invisible supersonic phenomena. Using a specially devised ultra-fast photography technique, the duo captured a bullet in flight. This image proved Mach's hypothesis of the existence of a wave around objects moving at speeds greater than the speed of sound. This wave, the shock wave, was made visible for the first time in human history. A monumental milestone indeed, yet this was but just one more step forward in the rise of the power of photography over the human eye. Just a year later, in 1887, Étienne Jules Marey, a French scientist, developed the chronophotographic gun, which could shoot 12 images per second. As opposed to Muybridge's use of a series of cameras, Marey needed just one to make his images. For all intents and purposes, the camera looked like any other old-fashioned machine gun. But of course, it was a groundbreaking camera which could quite literally shoot images never seen before. To shoot an image, Marey would aim the camera gun at a moving object like a hunter targeting its prey, pull a trigger, and record multiple shots of the object, each slightly displaced and superimposed into one single image. These images offered compelling representations of the mechanics of motion, such as the positions of a bird's wing during flight, a falling cat, and a man clearing a hurdle. Again, I want to remind you that images like these had never really been seen or maybe even imagined before this. Just let that sink in. Fast forward to nearly half a century, in 1931, Harold Edgerton invented the electronic flash, specifically the stroboscopic flash. This flash was essentially a repeatable short-duration electronic flash. By rapidly flashing, fast-moving objects could essentially be frozen in multiple exposures on the same photograph, not dissimilar to Marey's chronophotographic images. A professor of electrical engineering at MIT, he expanded on the work of Muybridge and Marey and became famous for his artistic and scientific studies of stop-action photography. He captured fleeting instances of time using electronic flashes with exposures lasting only 10 microseconds, 1/100,000th of a second, and repeating them at stroboscopic rates of 120 flashes per second. His camera and flash arrangement was so precise that it could capture the instant a balloon burst, the rapid beating of a hummingbird wing, or a speeding bullet after it pierced a playing card. These images were fascinatingly surreal, for they revealed to us common objects and their motion in highly detailed segments, as you guessed it, never seen before. While Marey painted time-lapse watercolors representing motion as a single fluid process, Edgerton carved nanosecond sculptures rendering motion into crisp, isolated instants. 3 years later, in 1934, Bell Labs introduced the Fastax, a rotating prism camera capable of 10,000 frames per second. Little did we know then, though, that the relentless march of high-speed photography advancements in our ways of seeing would eventually allow us to witness man-made horrors beyond comprehension. You see, while cameras were getting faster than ever, the world was hurtling itself right to the brink of another great war. A month before this impending Great War, in August 1939, Albert Einstein co-signed a letter with Leo Szilard to President Franklin D. Roosevelt, which warned of the potential for Nazi Germany to develop bombs capable of causing destruction on a scale hitherto unknown and unimaginable. The letter urged the U.S. government to initiate its own nuclear weapons research and secure uranium supplies. While Einstein didn't author the letter, his name carried significant enough weight to prompt the U.S. government's involvement in nuclear research, leading to the infamous Manhattan Project in 1942. Today, we think of the Manhattan Project as just a top-secret operation where they were building nuclear weapons. But it wasn't just about building the bomb. It was also a massive scientific and engineering documentation effort, without which the project would have stalled and probably even failed. You see, the Manhattan Project could not just throw some engineers and scientists together to magically create a bomb unlike any other before. No, it needed visual proof of progress for technical verification, engineering troubleshooting, military briefings for funding, and historical records for one of history's most secretive programs. In essence, the Manhattan Project was a mammoth of a techno-bureaucratic project. To that end, a dedicated clandestine photography and film unit tasked with documenting and supplementing every aspect of the bomb's development was created and stationed at Los Alamos, their work arguably as crucial as the actual bomb makers. This division operated under extreme secrecy, using cutting-edge and oftentimes improvised technology in its quest to document and foster the end of the world. As World War II raged on, military engineers for the Trinity test began building towers and protective bunkers for military personnel and instruments at 10,000 yards to the south, north, and west of Ground Zero. Known as 10,000 North, 10,000 West, and 10,000 South bunkers, they were reinforced with timber, concrete, steel, and earth. Inside the 10,000 North and West bunkers were housed Fastax high-speed cameras, film recorders, oscilloscopes, spectrographs, and remote firing controls. 10,000 South was the main control bunker with an automatic triggering device that would start the timing sequence of the explosion. Manhattan Project's lead scientist, the infamous J. Robert Oppenheimer, was at this very bunker. Hundreds of miles of wires buried in trenches or shielded where possible to protect them from heat and blast damage were strung between base camp, the instrumentation, and the control bunkers to carry signals from the automatic triggering system that turned on instrumentation, detonators, sensors, cameras, and carried data signals back to protected recorders. And in order to avoid overexposure from the explosion's blinding light, cameras faced upwards at mirrors that faced Ground Zero. In order to reduce dust interference and ensure a clear line of sight, camera towers were constructed well above the Jornada del Muerto desert floor, towering at around 30 feet. Sandbagged and armored, they were placed at various distances ranging from 800 yards to several miles away to capture different perspectives and phases of the blast. Near-field towers closer to Ground Zero were designed to allow capture of ultra-fast imagery of the initial stages of detonation, while far-field towers miles away focused on capturing the overall development of the nuclear fireball, mushroom cloud, and shockwave travel. According to the July 16th Nuclear Explosion Space-Time Relationships Report on the Trinity test, a total of 52 different cameras with varying film speeds, lenses, and exposures were used to capture the Trinity test on film. And so it was. While the destruction of Nazi Germany by Allied forces had ended the war in Europe, in the Pacific, Japan was desperately fighting a losing battle against America and her allies. But little did they know then that at Alamogordo, New Mexico, a new and secret weapon was about to be tested and documented in the desert for the first time ever.
A flare in the sky signaled the final countdown.
8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, now.
This was it. The world's first atomic bomb is detonated. At 0.016 seconds after detonation, the cameras take their first shot of history's first atomic bomb explosion. Within the first microseconds, a rapidly expanding fireball forms. This fireball's surface glows in intense blue-white, radiating heat and light unlike anything seen before. And then it begins to rise and expand at incredible speed, creating a shockwave that blasts outward across the desert. A mushroom cloud of smoke, dust, and radioactive particles shoot upward to around 40,000 feet. For those at a distance, a moment of eerie silence settles around them after the immense light in the sky. The initial blast wave arrives about 40 seconds later, roaring like thunder and shaking the ground violently. According to reports, the light was so intense that some observers saw the bones in their hands in silhouette through closed eyelids. Eyewitness accounts ranged from a ball of fire that grew to the size of a large building within seconds. Light so intense, the desert turned blue and white as if under midday sun. A pillar of fire surging up, turning into a giant mushroom cloud, red, yellow, and purple hues swirling inside. By the end of the monumental test, something like 100,000 pictures were taken with the 52 cameras. Just think of the weight of these images for a minute. Their profound significance, both as scientific records and cultural artifacts. It's almost inexplicable. These atomic images rendered not just the first atomic bomb's birth and death, but the moment humanity gained the power to photograph its own extinction. With the success of Operation Trinity, the classified films produced of the Trinity fireball were then rushed to President Truman at the Potsdam Conference. It was with these visual documents, along with a detailed Trinity report, that President Truman understood and confirmed the bomb's viability. His diary that night noted, "We have discovered the most terrible bomb in human history." After Japan refused the July 26 Potsdam Declaration ultimatum, which demanded Japan's unconditional surrender or, and I quote, "face prompt and utter destruction," the wheels were set in motion. August 6th, 8:15. Little boy is released from 31,000 feet over Hiroshima. Approximately 43 seconds later, at around 1,900 feet above the city, it detonates. And just 3 days later, Fat Man is also released over Nagasaki from 29,000 feet, detonating about 43 seconds later at around 1,650 feet above the Urakami Valley. Fires ignited across the city from a bomb unlike before, and within the hour, a black rain containing soot and radioactive particles fell across the fire-raised land. History was dead. But the United States of America was not going to stop there, or that was the plan anyway. Once the first images of the nuclear sublime were captured, there was no going back. Pandora's box was wide open. The race to capture it in ever more high detail was on. Inspired by this new era of unfathomed nuclear science, scientists would soon develop a new system to capture the first few milliseconds of a nuclear explosion. In 1949, Harold Edgerton, the man who invented the stroboscopic flash, developed the Rapitronic camera after being approached by the US government to solve the problem of photographing the earliest instance of nuclear explosions. You see, while the Trinity tests, Fastax cameras could only capture the expanding fireball in later phases, several milliseconds after detonation, the Rapitronic could capture the earliest microseconds. Essentially, it promised to be able to capture the fireball's birth in all its fire and glory. Enter Doomtown. Testing moved from the deserts of New Mexico to the deserts of Nevada for Operation Teapot. Officially known as Survival City, it was a full-scale mock American town built at the Nevada test site, 1.5 miles from Ground Zero, complete with mannequin families frozen in domestic scenes around dining tables and stocked refrigerators. Doomtown was a chillingly uncanny replica of 1950s American suburbia, constructed solely to be annihilated.
Here, just before dawn, for the first time in our history, American homes will be exposed to atomic blast. Today, Main Street of every American city and town.
In the town were two types of lead-shielded model homes. One, a typical wood frame house with a brick facade, and another reinforced with steel and anchored to its foundation. And in Doomtown's commercial district stood a gas station with vintage pumps and a parked 1955 Chevrolet, a grocery store with real canned goods behind glass storefronts, and even a functional radio station to test electromagnetic pulse effects. For this operation, 48 cameras were placed 2,750 to 10,500 feet away from ground zero on top of towers, in bunkers, and in the test houses. Many cameras were placed inside lead-lined boxes on sleds to capture mages of the blast, on mirrors directly exposed to the light of the blast. And in order to avoid film fogging due to nuclear radiation, despite using very slow stock which were not very sensitive to radiation, most external cameras were placed inside steel boxes fitted with 2.5-inch thick lead shields. In order to get above the dust raised by the bomb's shockwave, similar to Operation Trinity, many cameras were placed on towers like these, which consisted of a guide monopole with a small camera platform on top. The pole was an 8-inch steel pipe set in a reinforced concrete base, which housed electrical control circuitry and batteries in its cavity. And thus, it came to pass. Before dawn on May 5th, 1955, an eerie stillness settled over the Nevada test site. At the heart of the desert stood Doomtown. Mannequin families posed in domestic scenes awaiting their destruction. As the countdown began, scientists and military personnel took shelter in reinforced bunkers, while a battery of high-speed cameras, fast-ax, Rapatronic, and specialized rocket-mounted units prepared to document every millisecond.
8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
A 29-kiloton bomb detonated with a blinding flash that turned night into day. The fireball, reaching temperatures of 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit, vaporized wooden structures instantly, while the shockwave traveling at 120 miles per hour flattened brick buildings. And just as immediately as the shockwave destroyed everything in its path traveling away from ground zero, winds rushed back in, creating a surreal spectacle. Mannequins in direct line of sight burst into flames, while shaded ones remained intact. Within minutes post-explosion, armored recovery vehicles rushed in to retrieve film canisters before radiation could fog them. And as the sun rose over Doomtown's smoldering ruins, it had fulfilled its purpose. Its annihilation was now immortalized in film and history.
Lookout Mountain Air Force Station, a photographic installation of the Aerospace Audiovisual Service, Military Airlift Command.
Nestled in the Hollywood Hills on Wonderland Avenue, the U.S. Air Force established Lookout Mountain in 1947 as a Cold War black site. It was the U.S. government's classified film studio, equipped with a soundstage, film storage vaults, editing suites, and even screening rooms, dedicated to a singular mission: to turn nuclear annihilation into a controlled visual narrative. Between 1947 and 1969, military and civilian photographers, filmmakers, scriptwriters, producers, editors, and propaganda specialists made clandestine journeys to the mountain and collaborated to shape how the world saw and understood the atomic age. You see, from the earliest Trinity atomic tests, to particularly after facing fierce public resistance after the horrific bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the U.S. government waged a parallel war, not just for military supremacy in the Cold War, but for public perception as well. The aim of any nuclear test was twofold: to gather scientific data to refine the technology, sure, but just as importantly, to perpetuate the myth of nuclear survivability. Under the cover of the Hollywood skies, the secret Lookout Mountain unit edited top-secret nuclear test footage into usable reels and produced civil defense films to pacify the public, all while maintaining total secrecy. In fact, many crew members' families never knew the true nature of their work. During its 22 years of operation, Lookout Mountain Laboratory produced approximately 6,500 classified films and elaborate propaganda campaigns to normalize apocalyptic weapons. For example, in 1951, Lookout Mountain Laboratory produced Duck and Cover.
Duck and cover.
Be sure and remember what Bert the Turtle just did, friends, because every one of us must remember to do the same thing. That's what this film is all about. Duck and cover.
An infamous civil defense cartoon teaching children to hide under desks during nuclear attack. And in 1953, it produced A is for Atom, which portrayed nuclear technology as peaceful tools. Yep, personifying the atom as a friendly, powerful force of nature, capable of both destruction and creation. A is for Atom introduces 5 atomic giants, which man has released from within the atom's heart: the warrior and destroyer, the farmer, the healer, the engineer, and the research worker. Each giant pictured as a majestic, shimmering outline figure, towering and watching over the earth with an ever-loving gaze. It ends with a message of faith in science and industry, portraying the atom as a symbol of hope and progress.
On man's wisdom, on his firmness in the use of that power, depends now the future of his children and his children's children in the new world of the atomic age.
So long as the atom is wisely and responsibly controlled by American leadership, of course. That's the subtext. In December the same year, President Eisenhower delivered his Atoms for Peace speech to the UN General Assembly to pivot the global conversation about nuclear technology away from fear and destruction toward hope and constructive use under the benevolent guidance of American leadership.
To the making of these fateful decisions, the United States pledges before you, and therefore before the world, its determination to help solve the fearful atomic dilemma, to devote its entire heart and mind to find the way by which the miraculous inventiveness of man shall not be dedicated to his death, but consecrated to his life.
Following the speech, the U.S. launched the Atoms for Peace program, which became a cornerstone of its foreign policy during the 1950s. Under the framework of peaceful development, the U.S. disseminated nuclear technology and expertise to allied and non-aligned countries alike. In fact, it was through this program that the first nuclear reactors in Israel were built. But back on home soil, rural communities which lived downwind of test sites in Utah, Nevada, and Arizona were paying the price for America's atomic ambitions. Unlike the well-documented Nevada test site workers, these downwind rural communities, many of them small and isolated, experienced repeated exposure to radioactive material as they were often not informed or outright misled about the dangers of exposure. Instead, they simply watched the sky light up with pretty colors as they breathed in radioactive iodine-131 and strontium-90, blissfully unaware of the long-term health consequences of atmospheric radiation. And who could blame them? Lookout Mountain made Armageddon look like a beautiful sunset. On July 19, 1957, nearly a decade after the Manhattan Project, 5 Air Force officers stood together on a patch of ground somewhere in the Nevada desert. They marked that fateful spot, Ground Zero, Population 5. The scene opens to these 5 soldiers squinting, gazing up at the sky. 18,500 feet overhead, 2 F-89 jets roar into view. There is a countdown. 3, 2, 1. A missile is launched mid-air. The 5 men wait. A sudden white flash. The soldiers flinch. They look up, hands raised. A pause. An unsettling quiet. A potent silence that lasts for a beat. Then another, and then a roar. The sky explodes into fire as the soldiers cheer and congratulate each other. And then they look up again, awestruck. This was Operation Plumbob, a 2-kiloton high-altitude nuclear test conducted over the Nevada test site. The 5 soldiers were part of a public relations exercise carried out by the Air Force to demonstrate the possibility of the use of the weapon over civilian populations without ill effects. No protective gear, just standard uniforms. All captured on film by a 6th man. He, under instruction by the Air Force, had successfully framed the atomic bomb as a spectator sport. By showing soldiers casually observing the detonation, it replaced abject terror with technocratic awe, turning existential threat into a patriotic theater where nuclear war was manageable and radiation optional under the watchful, loving eyes of an omnipotent and benevolent government. So, who was the 6th man? The 2 colonels, 2 majors, and a 5th officer all volunteered to stand right below the blast. But this 6th man, the cameraman, Akira Yoshitake, did not. Born in Los Angeles in 1929, Yoshitake was the 3rd eldest of 5 children to Japanese immigrants. In 1942, however, Yoshitake and his family were among thousands of Japanese Americans sent to the Rower internment camp in Arkansas. Only after World War II did he return to Los Angeles as a young teen. Curiously, despite his Japanese heritage, Yoshitake expressed no hard feelings about the atomic bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, stating, "I thought dropping the bomb was necessary for ending the war as soon as possible. It's too bad it was the Japanese who had to suffer." In a twist of fate, it would be less than 12 years later that he would be assigned to capture the effects of the same nuclear bomb technology. Though, crucially, he was allegedly not aware of what his assignment would entail until arriving at the Nevada Test Center that day on July 19th, 1957.
I said, "Ground zero?" He said, "Yeah, but the bomb's going to go off 10,000 feet above you." I said, "Well, what kind of protective gear am I going to have?" Well, he said, "None." So I remember I had a hat, and so it was a baseball hat, so I wore that, just in case.
So with no protective gear, Yoshitake positioned himself for the genie shot, as it was called by the Air Force, though not without grave consequences. All 5 soldiers in the iconic film and Yoshitake the cameraman himself later developed cancer, with most of his colleagues dying in their 40s and 50s. Yoshitake, the 6th man, died on October 17th, 2013 in Santa Barbara at the age of 84. To photograph an atomic bomb is ultimately to confront layers of paradoxes, because as easily as a camera captures light, it also blinds us. A tool meant to document annihilation became a tool to sanitize the fallout. The same government that perfected high-speed photography to study fireballs used it to stage 5 men under a nuke to sell survival myths to a justifiably terrified public. With the greatest irony, might I add, an image captured by a Japanese American who was sent to an internment camp and released only after the US bombed Japan, only to then be hired as the 6th man to record propaganda to show the public that nuclear weapons were safe. For every breakthrough from Muybridge's galloping horse to Mach's shockwave to Mary's chronophotographic gun to Edgerton's electronic flash and Rapatronic camera, there were thousands more soldiers marching into fallout and down winders drinking contaminated milk under mushroom clouds. At the end of the day, the legacy of nuclear photography is seared in radiation burns, metastatic cells, and unmarked graves because the same lenses that overexposed the bomb's brilliance underexposed its victims. And in a further twist of irony, the same photographic innovations that monumentalized the nuclear tests now ensure instant footage of missile strikes the world over right to our pockets, collapsing 8 decades of nuclear history into an endless, algorithmic present. All while nuclear arsenals start to grow after decades of decline from the height of the Cold War. The more things change, the more they stay the same. It's dizzying. And yet, the powers that be are still hell-bent on making the end of the world palatable and consumable, and ultimately, banal. Yes, banal. After all, the ultimate exposure at the end of the world isn't of apocalyptic light on film, but of our capacity to be numb to what should shake us. To click, scroll, and frame our way past our annihilation. Ultimately, the 6th man's unwitting complicity mirrors our own. The tragedy isn't that we can't see, but that we've been trained to look without seeing at all. It almost feels like we've seen all the images there ever was and will be. Nothing is shocking or moving. Whatever it may be, it's best we relearn to see again, somehow, because the final image has yet to be framed.